Before the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much for helping me get to 500,000 subscribers last week. That is absolutely crazy to me, and I appreciate every one of you. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylei Hobby Time. For the month of July, my patrons voted on outposts and hideouts as the theme for the monthly art challenge. I always participate and make something within the theme as well, and I decided on a Mountaintop Lookout Outpost. I used some pink XPS insulation foam to build up the mountain peak. These are all still offcuts that I'm trying to use up from my train build back in February. I cut up the foam using a nice sharp utility knife, and I used the wooden base as a template. I wasn't too concerned about making it perfect because most of the volume is going to be shaved away anyways. I cut a few squares until I had a nice little stack, and I glued it all together with some foam safe super glue. Then, like Michelangelo, it was time to find the sculpture within. I couldn't find it, so I went on Google to get some inspiration there instead. I then started shaving away the foam chunks to get an imperfect cone shape, and while I was slicing, I felt a sudden hunger for shawarma. Once I had the main shape of the mountain cut out, I began refining it and adding smaller rock details using a combination of utility knife, pinching, and ripping until I had a cute little Matterhorn. I then cleaned up my workspace, and it was time for the terrain paste. The terrain paste is made from a combination of plaster, Mod Podge, acrylic hobby paint, and a splash of water. Once it was thoroughly mixed, I brushed it all over the foam. This will protect it later. Then I left it to dry. Once it was mostly dry, it was time to figure out the building that would go on top. I broke into my bits box and my styrene collection for some pieces that looked fun. I began the task of transforming all of these bits into a tiny outpost that sits on top of this tiny mountain, as one does. I started with this piece of sprue that looked about the right size for a good platform, and I cleaned it up before cutting some balsa wood strips into the little planks that would cover the platform. Once all the planks were cut, I glued them to the sprue. I then cleaned up the edges of the platform using some U-shaped styrene pieces, and I mounted the platform to the mountain using some overpriced styrene I-beams. I wanted to show some of the route up to the outpost, so I added some ladders, a little platform, and a walkway, which went down to the edge of the base. I added some railings to one half of the platform, and I built a little shed on the other half. The idea is that this was the original shelter with just enough room for a stove and a cot, and the rest of the building was an addition built later on to accommodate more comfortable living. I then used a piece of a diamond-plated styrene sheet, which was kind of a waste because I covered it with a thin sheet of corrugated metal. After that, I began working on the second story. I built another platform for this level, but this time, instead of making the floor from wooden planks, I used a piece of metal mesh. This step is also kind of a waste because this 24 karat gold mesh that I found gets painted over later anyways, so you can't even see the nice color. I then added some railings to the second story, and I made a little staircase to get from the second story up to the big room on the top level. I wanted some greeblies on the side of the bottom building, so I stole this piece from an X-Wing model. I also stole a little solar panel from a satellite model. I made the platform for the top level just a little larger. I made 4 balsa wood walls with some plastic canvas windows. I added panel lines and texture to all the walls off camera. I then made a roof with a sheet of diamond-plated styrene, and I threw on some scattered plates of metal to give it a little bit more character. To give this ridiculous building a slight appearance of structural integrity, I added some support beams to all of the areas with the widest overhang, and that was the majority of the building done. It was time to add the fun details. I made some antennas from tiny metal pipe pieces. I found this bag of offcuts of various sizes and lengths at my local hobby store, and it has been one of my favorite hobby material finds. I stacked up all the pieces till they looked relatively like antennas, and then I drilled some holes in the roof and I stuck the antennas in place. I also added a little box around the outside of the antennas to help set it apart from the rest of the roof. I then cut and bent some guitar strings and I made some cables that ran around the structure. I also made a tiny telescope from more of those metal tubes, a recommendation of my friend Max. I added a trapdoor and one final platform to go on the very top of the building so the telescope would have something to sit on. The final details that I added were some guitar string cables dangling around the building and 2 chimneys. And that was the construction of the building done. Then it was time to clean up my workstation, and take the model outside and prime it and get ready for painting. While there may not be structures quite as precariously built on the top of many mountains in real life, there are quite a few fire lookouts that you can actually go visit. This building was somewhat inspired by the Devil's Head Fire Lookout, which is not far from where I live in Colorado. I've been there a few times. It's a nice little hike, and it is the color inspiration for this build. Once the base coats were on, I used a combination of washes and the airbrush to tie everything together. I applied a blue, a brown, and a green wash to the mountain peak, and I sprayed it and the rest of the building lightly with some white to imply frost. The setting for the season this build is in is early summer, when the snow has melted everywhere except the tops of the tallest mountains. I wanted to imply cold, but not dead of winter. To make the last remnants of the snow, I mixed a little bit of Mod Podge with some soft snowflakes from Woodland Scenics. I don't know how they keep the snow from melting at room temp, but it's pretty impressive stuff. I applied the snow paste to most of the horizontal surfaces where snow would have naturally piled up. I applied it with a dental tool. Dental tools have become a recent favorite of mine thanks to a tip from Tinu of Craftastrophe. Speaking of his channel, the house that he made in his most recent video is very similarly precarious to this one. It's a great video. You should definitely go check it out after this. I then painted the little outpost man. This guy lives up here most of the year, and he spends his free time stargazing, writing music, and bird watching. Birding is definitely his most risky hobby, due to the size of the eagles that live in the area. They could all easily carry him off and eat him. The last things to do were to glue the little bird watcher into his position and paint a little bit of the base with black 3.0. After that, I called it good. Before my final shots though, here are the beautiful outposts and hideouts submitted by my patrons. A special thank you to all of the patrons who participated in the art challenge last month. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.